Hi, my name is Steven. On April 30th, 2016, 14 students and I went to Shizhou to live there for 28 days. This program is called Microcampus. Before I arrived in Shizhou, I had a list of topics to choose from. The topic that caught my eye was wall propaganda messages in Shizhou. I chose this topic because propaganda was always interesting to me. I always wondered why it was so easy to persuade the public with propaganda. Most of the sources I got were from Wikipedia. I got my sources from Wikipedia because it seemed like the most convenient place to go while still being mostly accurate. After researching, I came up with 10 big questions. These questions were about how propaganda influenced China and how propaganda has changed from before to now in Xizhou. After arriving at Xizhou, I did more research by talking to locals and looking at the propaganda. With the research I got from Xizhou, I have made a thesis statement. My thesis is: in order to understand propaganda messages in Shizhou, one must consider the meaning of the words, the purpose of the message, and the intended audience of the message. Let's look at the meaning of propaganda. Let's take a look at this piece of propaganda. The meaning of this piece of propaganda is hard to decipher, since it is a picture, not a bunch of sentences. This piece of propaganda shows a drawing of a woman surrounded by bags of rice, bountiful crops and vegetables, and sticks of bread. Mr. T told me that this piece of propaganda is from the Great Leap Forward, which was around 1966 to 1976. The purpose of the Great Leap Forward was to increase China's agricultural production through rapid industrialization. The Great Leap Forward also started the Great Chinese Famine. After studying the picture, my understanding of this message is that it is showing that the woman has plenty of resources. Now let's take a look at propaganda from the Cultural Revolution, which took place during 1966 to 1976. This piece of propaganda says, "Listen to Mao." The Cultural Revolution was led by Mao Zedong, with the goal of preserving the true communist ideology by destroying traditional and capitalist elements from the Chinese society. The Cultural Revolution led to the burning of ancient artifacts and books. Let's look at a picture of propaganda from modern times now. This might just look like a picture for tourists visiting Xizhou, but it is much more. Notice the English words on the right of the picture. It says incorrupt government. This convinces the tourists that China has a good government that does the best for its country. Now let's look at the purpose of these three propaganda messages. After asking Mr. T about this piece of propaganda, he told me that this piece of propaganda used to be right across from what used to be a food distribution warehouse during the Great Leap Forward. After knowing that, I realized what this piece of propaganda's purpose was. This piece of propaganda's purpose was to show people that were getting food from the warehouse that they still had lots of food and they won't starve. As I have said before, this message says listen to Mao and it is from the Cultural Revolution. The purpose of this message is to tell the people to listen to Mao. If people listen to Mao's orders and listen to what he told them to do, then it would be much easier for Mao to rule the country. Since this piece of propaganda literally says incorrupt government, the purpose of this piece of propaganda must be to impress foreigners and tourists that come to China, and also to tell them that China's government is a good one. Now that we've gone through the meaning and the purpose, let's look at the intended audience of these three pieces of propaganda. Since this piece of propaganda used to be next to a food distribution warehouse, it was obviously meant for adults to see when they were trying to get their food. I found this piece of propaganda on a wall near an intersection, so this must mean that it was intended for all the people from the village to see. This piece of propaganda is technically part of a welcoming thing for tourists that come to visit Xizhou. So the intended audience must be for tourists and foreigners that are visiting. Now that I have explained the meaning, the purpose, and the intended audience of 3 different pieces of propaganda from different time periods, let's see if we can piece those 3 pieces of information together. The meaning of this piece was to listen to Mao, and the purpose of this piece was to make people to listen to the government so that the government could give orders to the people. And the audience for this message is basically everyone. This message is showing that the woman has plenty of food and resources to sustain her life. The purpose of this message is to tell people that they still have plenty of food, and the audience of this message is anybody that goes to get food from the food distribution warehouse. And this piece's meaning is that China has an incorrupt government, with the purpose being convincing foreigners and tourists that are visiting that China has a good government, with the audience being tourists and foreigners that are visiting. You can tell now that by understanding the meaning, the purpose, and the intended audience of the piece of propaganda, it is much easier to understand what the propaganda actually means. I hope that through this video of my learning experience, I helped you to understand propaganda. I also want to thank my chaperones, Mr. Chi and Miss Mai, for supporting me and giving me the correct resources and tools that I need while studying at Xizhou. Just with 1 month at Xizhou with my fellow Microcampus students, I have learned more about myself than my 13 years at school have ever taught me. I want to thank Mr. Chi and Miss Mai for giving me this one-of-a-lifetime experience that I will never forget for the rest of my life. Thank you for watching my learning journey, and I hope you learned some interesting things about how to understand propaganda.